Good evening, everyone. I'm Lynn Videcka, Dean of the School of Social Work, and I want to welcome you all to Celebrating Student Activism, a lecture and discussion in honor of the CASC Minor's 10th anniversary. And I'm sure everyone knows, but CASC stands for Community Action and Social Change. The School of Social Work is so proud of the CASC Minor. Over the years, it has grown in scope, size, and prominence on campus. It is one of the largest majors on campus, drawing students from across many different majors and schools. I want to take a moment right now to thank Katie Richard Schuster, to thank Amber, Joe, all the students and alumni who've made the CASC program what it is today. The CASC Minor is recognized across campus as a social justice leader and a space for students to think, develop, and engage in community change. Since the first class in 2010, CASC has evolved in ways that the school could have never initially imagined. Now, 10 years later, we have over 900 alumni from CASC. We are delighted to be here tonight for this virtual celebration and to celebrate the work of CASC over the last 10 years, as well as to set the stage for its work in the future. Once again, special thanks to the inspirational leadership of the CASC team, Katie Richard Schuster, founding director, Amber Williams, Joe Galura, and the entire team of students, staff, and alumni who've worked to prepare for this celebration and to make CASC a resounding success. Welcome, and the program will begin.
Thank you very much, Dean Videcka, and thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to just take a second and share my screen. Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us tonight. Thank you to the school for your ongoing support of the CASC Minor. A special thanks to the School of Social Work Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office and the Associate Dean for Educational Programs Office for their co-sponsorship of tonight's program. My name is Katie Richard Schuster, and I'm the founding director of the CASC Minor. And it's truly been the honor of my career to work with CASC and its evolution over the last 10 years. So I put together a very small set of pictures, homemade, so it's not super fancy, but that helps to develop, document some of the evolution and set the stage for tonight's talk. So I want to start with the very first class. We began actually in winter 2010 with the first Social Work 305 course. And for some of you on the call, you'll know, or you maybe have taken the Social Work 305 class, this is the foundation course for the minor. And then the first graduating class were 27 students in April of 2011. And from there, we've grown to over 100 graduates per class with over 250 students in the minor at any one given time. But it's essential to note that the CASC would not be what it is, and we would not be here tonight without so many of you who have played roles in helping us develop the minor. So many staff and faculty and program partners, and of course students who have shaped the minor along the way. And I want to just take a special note, as the dean had mentioned, to say thank you to the CASC staff and the core social work faculty over the years who have really been the heart and soul of the minor and made it what it is. And some of them are pictured here. Since 2010, CASC has been a multidisciplinary minor, engaging students from across campus and critically reflecting on community change, thinking about the big picture and context for change, exploring themselves as community change and social change agents, developing skills to facilitate change in diverse communities, and engaging in opportunities that enable students to take action on campus and in the community around issues that they care about. At the core of the minor has always been about helping students to build a community and find community with other students who care deeply about social justice and social change. Supporting and lifting up student voice and student activism has been at the center of this work and has been a force in evolving the minor to what it is today. It's been the students that have shaped the direction, the curriculum, and the programming. It was their ideas that launched the So Cool, So Just student fair that is now an annual event. That have brought speakers and educational workshops to campus, established student boards, and it started global and summer internships and created social programming to build community. And it was their ideas that have pushed the minor to be better, to challenge us to strengthen our work, our partnerships, and our commitment to social justice. And as I reflect back on CASC, I'm so proud of the growth, but also that we continue to be a community to foster student activism and empower students to engage in social change work. We are so thankful to our incredible campus partners, including the Program on Intergroup Relations, Poverty Solutions, Michigan Community Scholars Program, Semester in Detroit, Ginsberg Center, the Center for Socially Engaged Design, the Trotter Multicultural Center, Spectrum Center, among so many other academic and campus partners who share the vision to support student activism and work with us in a range of ways. And tonight is a celebration of the students and the over 900 alums of the CASC Minor and the various ways that they have engaged in student activism during their time on campus, and the ways that they continue to bring CASC and social justice work with them in various ways. And we kind of joke that during the first graduation ceremony, and that was something that the students really wanted, was to have their own graduation to celebrate the work that they had done together, that they talked about what they were going to do to CASC, and they turned it into a verb. So they talked about CASCing. And so tonight's event is really about how students and alums continue to bring these ideas with them and continue to CASC wherever they go. Tonight is an opportunity to think, reflect, and celebrate, but also to imagine possibilities for student activism now and in the future. And we thank you all for being here tonight and celebrating this 10th anniversary with us. But before I pass the mic, I just want to make a special appreciation to Amber Williams. Many of you know that Amber, who's the CASC Assistant Director, has been the lifeblood of CASC for the last 4 years. Her leadership, activism, innovation has evolved CASC to be what it is, and I am forever grateful for her partnership in this work. This event tonight is completely happening because of her excellent vision and leadership. Amber will be leaving us in CASC in her full-time role to start a PhD program in higher education at the University of Michigan, just sharing the building next to us, but she'll be in this new role. And we are so thrilled for her to start this new journey. We're also really excited that she'll still be with us in some ways and will be continuing to teach with us. But we are mostly so grateful for the legacy of the work that she's built in CASC. So just wanted to take this minute. We'll have other celebrations for her, but I couldn't let tonight pass without just really letting her know how much we appreciate her and how much this celebration is in honor of her work and all that she's contributed. So a virtual clap for me. And anyways, we appreciate you and we thank you for all you've done. And we look forward to celebrating with you tonight and in the future. And with that, I'm going to turn to her to introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Katie. And it is really a joy to be here today and just so excited about this program. And also, again, it's bittersweet to be exiting the minor as we wrap up our 10th year, but also recognizing that there's so much work that's been embedded in the minor and so much to come ahead. And so it really has been an honor to work with you all. And I'm super excited to continue that journey moving forward as well. So thank you. So with that, I have the esteemed privilege of introducing our amazing speaker today, Kim Catron. So Kim Catron is an internationally acclaimed award-winning educator, writer, artist, and consultant. Recognized stateside as one of the Roots Young Feminists to Watch, celebrated in Canada as 2016's National Youth Role Model, and nationally as one of the 50 most loved gay Canadians. As an educator, Kim traveled travels around the world talking to people about justice, equity, and human rights. One of the most fundamental things she shares is a reframing of the golden rule. The golden rule suggests that we should treat other people the way that we want to be treated. That might seem simple enough, but it assumes that there is a standard for other people's experiences. Instead, she encourages audiences to treat people the way they want to be treated, which means we have to ask. A passionate speaker, Kim is dedicated to intersectionality and invested in arousing a sense of curiosity and empathy in her audience. She uniquely weaves together the historical context, statistical analysis, as well as current events. She is a dynamic speaker, invested in the issues and inspiring in her approach to solutions by focusing on small, meaningful actions and choices. She makes creating large-scale change accessible. A public speaker, researcher, consultant, and human rights educator, she has shared hundreds of unique resources and presentations around issues including race, ability, and gender. As a social entrepreneur, she speaks to the opportunities and challenges for women in business and leadership roles. And with great openness, she welcomes difficult conversations, hosting community dialogues, and sharing practical strategies around sexuality and consent, queer and trans allyship, and anti-racism and equity. So really excited to have Kim speak with us today about our theme, celebrating action and thinking about student activism and leadership. So yeah, take it away, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me. And Amber, thank you for inviting me and for creating the spaces that you do. You're definitely not new to this. You're so true to this. You've been doing this work for such a long and important time, and we're all really grateful for the way that you connect people together. So thank you so much. I've been in activist spaces since I was a teenager, since I was 16. And now I'm a mom, and I really think back to how much we've witnessed just an enormous kind of change in such a short period of time. There's a study that was done, that was published in the American Political Science Review, and what it was assessing was really activism. So it was trying to determine what was the most effective tool in creating large-scale change across the world. And so they measured this across multiple continents over several decades, and in all cases, they found that what was most successful were grassroots organizers. More successful than representation in government, more successful than changing the laws. Grassroots, active grassroots groups were more successful in creating change because, in particular, they had a nuanced experience of what the challenges people were really facing. And they were able to bring these issues up and share them in ways that people were really able to access. So we know that regardless of when you started your process of activism, that we know that it is truly the most effective way of creating change. And it can be easy to feel like small groups of people don't transform the world, but in truth, that's all that ever has. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone. So if you are anything like anyone in this year, it's been really difficult, I think, to maintain a specific kind of focus on pretty much everything with the way that the world is happening all around us. And so I want us to really be patient with ourselves and present with ourselves, because this is part of it. I think I feel a little bit bad for the students in the future that have to study, history and include the chapter on 2020 and think about how big that chapter is really going to be. That this is really those years, and part of those years where when we look back at them, we'll wonder, what was everyone doing in this time? In this time of such a great movement with civil rights, in a time of such a great shift in terms of health and the way that we relate to one another, who we think about as being safe and what we think about as being essential, so many of the core tenets of the way that we work with each other are transforming right now in front of us. So this time is so crucial and so significant for all kinds of activism, but most of all for student activism, because all of this world is inherited into your hands. I think about the kind of activism that I've been involved in, and one of them for me is yoga. So I teach yoga, but particularly I teach yoga in communities of color primarily. This was from a class that I taught in a housing project for several months. And when I started teaching, it was specifically around this idea of wanting to connect people who needed to have this access to a tool and a practice that I thought could be so empowering, supportive around health. And when I would do this, I think that sometimes people couldn't quite understand how exactly this fell under my ideas of activism. But being present in health and in joy and in creating spaces where we feel comfortable in our bodies, these things are also a part of a healthy activist practice too. That creating, once we offload care as being something separate or something that happens after, we can miss the opportunity to integrate care into the very fabric of the way that we work with each other. So I want us also to think about, in the way that we think about what our activism looks like, especially as we're moving through these times of COVID, I want us all to consider where those intersections of activism and health and community really can lie with each other, and what are the opportunities that we have with one another over the next bit of time. Something that I think this year has taught me, especially when thinking about what my activism practice looks like on a daily basis, is this idea of habits over goals. So I think in the past, I used to be able to be a little bit better at this, but setting a very clear goal and aiming towards it and hitting that goal and then continue to kind of check things off. But one of the things I recognized, especially this year, that I was really made by the things I did every single day. What were the tangible habits that I was engaged in? And once I would notice, especially because I had so much more of an opportunity to really reflect on how I've worked, that I was actually noticing, okay, for the past 6 months, the thing I do every day is walk the dog for an hour. And this I found was a really incredible opportunity for me to connect with people in my community that I didn't normally talk to. And then I was thinking, what opportunities lied in that space of connection? So instead of thinking about how I was going to go and organize somewhere else, or how I was going to plan an event somewhere, but in a time where we can't plan events, I started really thinking what my day looks like and how am I building in a reflexive practice in my day, in my activities, the ways that I normally work. I say this a lot, but the grass is greenest where we water it. The most powerful, consistent change happens often in the communities that we live in the places that we walk, and the places that we nurture. I also think when I look back at the history of the work that I've done, one of the practices I think are particularly important is this idea of making maps, not monuments. And I think we've seen a lot of movement with monuments in the news recently, and people having very strong personal opinions about where they feel the place of those monuments are in our lives. And I'm not contesting that, but what I am suggesting is that monuments really only give us a small picture of one individual. Sometimes they might give us some information, but truly not enough. But a map has the capacity to not only give us a path or a direction, but also tell us about an entire landscape, where the pits and the valleys are, and where our challenges actually lie. And so I want to invite you to consider this in any practice you're involved in, is to make maps, to really clearly map out what worked, but also what didn't, to have really strong records of how we were able to move in these ways, because we're not necessarily thinking about change as something that only happens generationally, but really thinking about change as something that happens over generations. And so if we're doing that, we want to be able to make maps for the people who come after us so they know what we were able to accomplish, but they also know the places where we fell short. And our goal is always that, especially as teachers, as educators, our goal is always for our students to surpass us. We want you to take up the opportunities that are laid in front of you and innovate in a way that we could never have imagined or we weren't resourced to. And this is why this idea of making maps and not monuments. So not just making pictures, or not just making leaders, or not just putting individuals on pedestals, but actually telling the truth and having a story of all the ways that we got to be in the place that we are. It's also about talking to key stakeholders. And I think that when I first began organizing and I was starting my first nonprofit, I was 18, the very first step, and I was very grateful to be told this, was to talk to all the people who are already doing the work. Make sure that I'm aware of all the things that I'm already inheriting, even though we might see that there are gaps. And it was such a solid kind of advice to get from another activist who had already been in the game for decades, and so really benefiting from that experience, was to talk to the people who are most meaningfully impacted in the work that you're trying to do, and the people who have been involved in it for well before you have gotten there. Because we really want to give people the opportunity to actually have consent, but also recognizing that for so many marginalized communities, that no can be a privilege that is often not accessible. And so knowing that people have not always had the ability to say yes or no is so important. And it really connects to this idea of making maps, not monuments. One of the students that I have worked with in the past, when she did her PhD, she also presented it to the community that she worked with because she was doing a lot of research that would directly impact them. And what she found was that over years, when people had assessed this community as being a vulnerable community, they'd done all this research, but they never made it accessible to the people who actually live there. And these were people who really wanted to make that change as well. So the importance of being able to connect and have partnerships that extend across academic spaces into community spaces, we need each other, all of each other. And those kinds of practices are so important for us to be able to keep integrating as we move forward. Because those maps, having those multiple stories and multiple blueprints, give us a better context of how we're going to work. And this is a picture from the Glad Day Bookshop, and is really kind of a testament to how important it has been to include more and more narratives from diverse perspectives, and how significant that is in terms of us understanding our history and then how we map our present. Because the truth is that we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. So one of the activities I sometimes do when I work with teams is I ask people to describe a color that they haven't seen before. And so often when we take the time to do that, we usually will just describe a color that's like a color we've seen before. That we really can't imagine a color that we don't have a frame of reference for. So when we recognize that, we understand that we really are only imagining within our very specific frame or our very particular context. And so a lot of the time what we are doing is projecting those things onto other people. And giving these opportunities, we can shift that approach, knowing that that's just a very natural human thing to do, but something that we need to bring a kind of intentional awareness to, so that we aren't allowing it to shift our opinions and perspectives of the entire world. I think activism has always been about language. And I think we've seen, this year has been so unique because we've seen a growth and change that we haven't seen happen in the same way. Even though we know activists and advocates have been working behind the scenes and in front of the scenes and in the streets for decades leading up until this moment, we definitely saw and felt a deep fever pitch this year. There comes a point where people really, so many issues could not be ignored. And we watched to see what the responses looked like across the world to how people dealt with the urgency of these issues. And when I watched the Associate Press changed its writing style guide on June 19th to capitalize the B in Black when referring to people, and this is alongside the I in Indigenous, the L in Latina, this was alongside all of them. This wasn't something that they were asked specifically to do in this particular time, but something that we have to be honest that they were pushed to. That this is part of what it looks like for us to hold each other accountable. And we can again see this a lot from this year, that we don't often change unless we are uncomfortable. That when we're really comfortable and things are really easy, there isn't really a motivation to change. There's a desire to appreciate what's ever happening and actually work on trying to maintain that level of comfort. We don't want things to be uncomfortable. But what we do find is that when we are in that place of discomfort, it gives us the capacity to change in ways that we would not find given that that was removed. We saw how the name of this team finally got changed after so much push, so much organizing by Indigenous activists for such a long time, to only find that it actually wasn't as difficult as we were all told that it wouldn't be. It wasn't as impossible as we thought it was going to be. And I do think that this is one of those moments that reminds us that these ideas of what impossible looks like or what never look like are often based on a very specific moment and the investment of a particular group of people. That it is always possible. The one thing we do know for sure is that things will keep changing. We don't know how that will happen, but activism presupposes that we want to be intentional about how that change happens so that we are not actually taken over by that movement. Bringing back to this idea that I was talking about in terms of healing, for me, it really has been, and I've been understanding more about what it looks like to think about healing in activist spaces. So this acupuncturist, I went to her for a few different things, but one of the last times I went to her, she was, feeling out my body and letting me know what was going on. And she said, "Have you ever considered activism for racism?" And I was so confused. I was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I've been noticing that people who do a lot of work around, anti-racism or a lot of work around like gender activism, that there tends to be a buildup of tension in a couple of very specific parts of the body." And I thought that was, obviously sad, but fascinating. That just was something that she has started to notice even with the clients that she works with. And so what she offered was that she could tailor a very particular session for me to help reduce the impact that racism has on the body. Which I thought, wow, consider the number of people who are in the world who are experiencing, the physical symptoms of either experiencing racism or working actively against it to dismantle systems and structures, and can be, physically impacted, but are completely unaware of it, or are having other medical practitioners dismiss it as not being related to something that's real. And this for me was really an important testament to the ways in which this work is real. And it has very real, tangible impacts, not only on our culture and our community, but on ourselves as individuals. And so it is just as important to work in a way that is about preserving the self and preserving each other, preserving your relationships and the support and the community that is around you, as it is to be effective in the work that you're doing. That effectiveness also has to be measured in terms of the quality of our lives and the quality of care that we're able to provide for ourselves and the people around us. Her name is Amrit, if you want to follow her on Instagram. She's really great. For me, activism has been about building empathy. This has always been, and really increasing the amount at which people care. For lack of a more complex way of describing it, it really is about care. It's not that I think that people need a more logical approach, although that is important and necessary. But when I think about when people are motivated to do really significant things, it's because they care just so much that it moves them and inspires them to really do significant things. So I think that activism is also about inviting people and helping them find an entry point. And I think about this in terms of an access bias, that we're looking for an entry point to help build people's empathy for each other. So even though you may not have the lived experience of being a racialized person, or you may not have the experience, of having a different ability, you may have the experience of what it means to be older. Maybe you have the experience of what it looks like to come from, generational poverty. So these points of entry can be places that we use that bloom open, that give us more empathy and understanding for experiences that are different from our own. And this is part of what I like to tap into with people. I find that when people are able to connect to their own experience, then it can, that same kind of compassion that they might feel for themselves, they can see why they would want to extend it out to someone else, recognizing that we do share connectivity. I also think as part of that understanding is this concept that we talk so much about in terms of intersectionality. And I know that we know, Kimberly Crenshaw and the way that she has coined this very specific term and what it means for her when she's describing how certain identities are declared as being more vulnerable on an institutional level. And I really like this particular example because I felt like it was such an important way of showing that it really is a very specific and unique intersection. So several years ago in France, they were trying to ban the burkini, okay? And so this was particularly on a beach in France, and it was very obviously traumatic for people because they would have police officers coming up to them and asking them to remove what they were wearing. Now, in response to this, an imam actually noticed that at the same beach that there were nuns wearing nun habits. And they said, well, if you're trying to ban the burkini, then wouldn't this same ban extend to nuns who are wearing nun habits? And obviously, once that very clear inconsistency was brought, they, recognized that they actually could not go forward with the ban as they desired to. Now, that's why it's not sufficient for us to say something as though this is something that affects women, or that it affects, women who are modest, or that it even only affects women who are modest and conservative. But it is specifically women in this case who are living at the intersection of being women and being Muslim, who are uniquely targeted. And intersectionality really is an important reminder for us that we need those nuances of people's experiences because our responses cannot just be blankets. They cannot be about wanting to increase an experience or increase an opportunity for all women, because all women are not desiring the same kinds of opportunities or are in the need of the same kind of protection. And I'm so grateful for Kimberly Crenshaw and other people in those roles who give us this kind of language so that we can critically understand exactly how we can most be effective in the work that we do. I also think that when we see those things in practice, it ends up being particularly beautiful. So in pre-COVID times, I took my daughter to the Jewish Community Center and she would take her swimming lessons. And there is this family and all gender change room. So I took a picture of it. I was like, this is so cute. I'm so happy this is here. And then I was in the change room and I was sitting beside an elderly couple in their late 70s. And we started chatting and they were saying, I love these all gender change rooms. And I was like, why? What makes you even think about them as being important? And they went on to explain to me that, they are each other's primary support. So they can't actually get in the pool or get dressed or get ready without each other. And normally when they go to any other sort of pool, there isn't an opportunity for them to be in the same change room with each other. And I thought to myself, a lot of the time people will assume that activism is for a very small, vulnerable percentage of the population. But something that was designed for the most vulnerable ends up increasing the quality of experience for really everyone. That this elderly couple who isn't really thinking about how it may impact a lot of other people are recognizing how grateful it is for them and how wonderful it is for them. So it's also seeing how once we are able to elevate the needs of people who are vulnerable or look to the vulnerable as a starting point when we start to identify what standards and metrics look like, it means that we're actually able to work in a way that is better able to support everyone. Because there really has never been a time in history where activism has been welcomed. It's never been, I think a lot of the times there's this idea that, just wait a little bit longer or just eventually we'll get to this point. But there really has never been a time where we've gotten to that point where people have said, okay, now we're ready to talk about these pressing issues that have been brought up by people. So it has always been people who have made the decision to peacefully create discomfort in the people around them so that they can bring their attention to a very specific issue. And this can happen in ways across race. It can happen across access needs. It happens across gender. but we grow our character in our discomfort. One of the things I also do with my daughter is every morning we have this practice where I talk to her about what our values are as a family. So right now we have 3 values. They're respect and kindness and honesty. And so in the day, when she does things that reflect those values, I make a point of saying, like, look at you. That was so respectful. That's one of our values. That's what we do as a family. You know, I want her to see that values are not just ideas that we think about, but they're actual actions that we live in all the time. And when we want to consider whether we are people of our values or people of our word, that this isn't something that was determined, 5 years ago when you first did that amazing campaign, or a year ago when you organized and you did this wonderful project, but really every single day in the way that we treat each other and the way that we act. And while people will ask you, what you want to be when you grow up, people might not keep asking you who you want to be when you grow up, but you have to ask yourself that question. You have to wonder and really seek to answer, who are you trying to be? What does integrity look like for you? What about these values that you are saying are so important to you? On a daily basis, if people look to you, could they see that you were actually meaningfully about those values? I think part of it is also about shifting the way that we think about making mistakes. So a lot of the time what we try to do is avoid mistakes. And so that's kind of an avoidance learning. So we make a mistake, we learn that we don't like making mistakes, or that there's a social cost to making mistakes, and we avoid it, or we try to hide it. Versus reward-based learning, which is really about, there being a reward based on how you learn. And there was this really interesting study at USC that showed that failure is actually a rewarding experience when the brain has a chance to assess its options and its mistakes. So I want you to really consider what that can look like for you. So instead of, when we make mistakes, and I know I definitely did this, wanting to just distance yourself from those mistakes as quickly as possible, I really want you to take the time to reflect on your mistakes. As part of my personal practice every day, and this is again thinking about like what your daily habits are, I write down all of the things that I am grateful for, but I also write down all of the things that I am aware of, that or all the mistakes that I may have made throughout the day. So maybe I wasn't as patient as I could have been. Or maybe I was driving in traffic and I cut that person off. But being able to be in a self-reflective place and being able to be self-critical is so crucial for you to be able to maintain a healthy relationship as an activist. When I think about the people who are the most valuable friends in my life, they're the people who can tell me when I'm wrong. You always want to have people around you who have your best interest in mind, but can also clearly tell you like, maybe you made a mistake there, or maybe you shouldn't have said that, or maybe now would be a good time to apologize. Because we will never continue in our work without making mistakes. But what we do have the capacity to do is to apologize for them and actually have the opportunity to learn from them. Because mistakes do really significant things for us. They force us into deep introspection. So crucial. The ability to take the time to think back and understand what the motivations of our actions are. Is this mistake tied to something else? Is it tied to a belief or an idea that may be connected to an experience that you had? You can be humbled. And one of the greatest gifts in life, and I can say this, after having a little bit more life, is to be humbled. To be humbled in the face of the work that you're doing, or humbled in the face of the work that other people are doing, but to have that moment to be humbled is actually a really grateful one. You find out what you're really made of. That's many times through your life, you want to be able to ask yourself, like, what is at the core of who you are? Is it family? Is it friends? Is it community? What are the things that truly make you who you are, and how do you treat those things with value in your life? And coming to this last, you realize what's important to you and what's not. And these are really important questions that we will keep asking ourselves through our lives. And activism can be this beautiful portal by which we do that, not only about ourselves, but about the communities that we create with each other. we're not just accepting them as what they are. I always believe we have a responsibility to create a world that is more ethical than the one that we were born into. And making mistakes really just leave us in this place where, guess I'll just grow and do better next time. And I love this, that we can just grow. We can just change. We can adapt and evolve and learn that making a mistake isn't the be all and end all, even though I think that at different times in your life, you can feel like, oh, this mistake will never, ever go away. And how will I ever recover for it? But that's the thing. Time happens in ways that we could not imagine. And those mistakes may not be the same significant later on, but the learning that you have from the mistakes that you make, that can absolutely take with you for the rest of your life. So mistakes are information, and information is an asset. And that is really what we're looking for. Really and truly, that's what, when we walk away from every situation, is we hopefully get to walk away from the situation with information. With more information about ourselves, more information about other people, more information about the world. And this is part of what the benefit of working together in teams are. When we collaborate with each other, it means we have the opportunity not to just make a mistake, but to learn from other people's mistakes. So it means we don't have to make the same one, which is actually such a great gift. To be in a moment where you get to learn from a difficult mistake that someone else has made so that you don't have to go and make the exact same mistake yourself. I'm sure many of you have read Brené Brown or have seen the work that she does. And I think that anyone who is doing work around bravery and courage and shame and integrity really resonates with me. I think that these again are ideas we often see in fairy tales or Disney movies, but we don't think about what those things look like often on a very daily basis, because they're not just ideas that exist in a far away land. They're things that we work through in our body and in our communities every day. So integrity is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun or fast or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them. And that will be the work. I think that especially after coming out of university, I was really good with language. I could definitely profess very clearly what my values were, but when I would think about how to put them into practice, especially on a regular basis, I really struggled there. I struggled with what that looked like. And so I want you to find that struggle and be in that struggle, but then live through those values, actually practice them. And not just to people who are outside of your life, but also the people who are inside of your life. This was a hard one that took me years to come to, but don't seek praise, seek criticism. And obviously you have to find the right people that you can get that kind of criticism from. But I think initially that's what I sought. I was looking for praise. I wanted people who would celebrate me consistently and make me feel supported. And that's important too. Your friends and your family are people who you want to do that. However, when you're just receiving praise, you're not receiving the necessary criticism in order to grow. When you're receiving praise, it feels good. It's a good dopamine hit. It feels nice on the inside, but it doesn't encourage us to do that introspective work and to think about how we grow. So seek that criticism. Like whenever you do something and people are like, that was so great. Be like, yes, but do you have any feedback that you might want to give me? Like don't be afraid to hear those kinds of things, because you hear it, you learn it, and you own it, and then you're allowed to grow. Like we can just keep growing. It's beautiful. So in general, the work that you do is about assessing a cultural climate. It's about, being empathic in a lot of ways and feeling what's happening around us and determining what we do about it. And I want to share, there's a great doctor, Dr. Gabor Mate, and he does really significant work around trauma and human psychology. And he explains that all human beings have two very basic needs for attachment and authenticity. Now, attachment is like you're born and you need to be attached. You need your grown-ups, whoever they may be, to be loving and supportive and taking care of you because you're fully dependent on them. But you also need authenticity. And authenticity means, especially as a baby, that if you cry or if you're having a bad baby day, you want to know that your grown-ups are not going to abandon you. They're not going to say, you being honest about how you're feeling is too much and I don't actually want to do it. And as we grow up, we seek pretty much the same thing. We're looking for attachment with other people and the ability to be our authentic selves in those attachments. But what researchers have found is that if we are not able to achieve authenticity, we will forego it for the attachment. So if we can't be honest with people and tell someone, hey, that thing that you said was actually like low-key racist, if we can't do that, we will let go of the authenticity. So we will no longer seek out the ability to be honest because we want to maintain the attachment. That we are actually, as humans, what we want is attachment to each other. And we don't want to risk the social and economic cost that comes from losing relationships that may be really significant for us. And activism really is a way in the world that we are hoping to reconcile those things for people. We want them to have a space where, yes, you are attached, you still get to have access to all the wonderful things that you need, and you can say, this is racist. And you can say, this is ableist, this is difficult. And it's really in the way that we keep these things together. We allow people to maintain their relationships and still be able to express with authentic criticism when systems and structures are failing them, and even just on a personal level. I'm going to share a little story. As part of my mom group, we have moms from kind of all over, and one of the moms comes from like a very small rural town just outside of the city, like a few hours away. And her son and my daughter are very, very close. And he would sometimes like call her a little nickname and call her in French a monkey. And this happened maybe once in front of me. And I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, okay, like how will I approach this situation? And then I didn't even have to think very long because the next day the mom came to me and she like held my hands very, very tightly. And she said, you know, I don't know very much about these things, but my husband mentioned that maybe this term, like monkey in an affectionate way, might not be something that feels really comfortable for you. And I thought about it and I was like, yes, that is definitely true. And I know that you didn't mean it with any negative intention, nor did your son. And she was like, I didn't, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's totally okay. I'm so glad you spoke to me. I'm really happy we can have this conversation. And I know that you didn't mean it with any ill intention. And even the way she was physically holding my hands and we were standing very close with each other, eventually we were like half hugging, you know, it was clear for both of us that we did not want to lose our attachment to each other in this moment where we were being really vulnerable and risking a lot of authenticity. And I was just watching this happen and thinking like, this is what we need from each other. The ability to do these things, that activism that happens in the moments where we get to have these very honest conversations with people and still hold each other tight. Still hold each other close, go through this difficult conversation and get to the rewarding place and actually grow from those kinds of interactions. Because a lot of the time what we are seeing, you know, is just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. We don't see the fullness of the things that are happening. And that's really what this year has taught us, the amount of things that are actually below the surface that are so significant that eventually will come up and we will see more and we'll all have to reckon with in various different ways. And to know that these are things that actually start so very, very young. So lemons, you're like, why are there lemons on the screen? Let me explain. So there's this study that was done with the University of California, and it was done with kids between the ages of 4 and 6. And they divided them into 2 groups, boys and girls, and they gave them both lemonade. And the difference with this lemonade was that instead of being sweetened with sugar, they added salt to the lemonade. Now, when they gave the lemonade to the little boys, they very clearly, you know, said like, yuck, this is gross, I don't want to drink this. Amazing, right? This is exactly what they should say. It's gross. They shouldn't have to drink this. But on the other side, when they gave the lemonade to the girls, all of these little girls drank the lemonade. Most of them would even go out of their way and compliment and say, this is actually really great lemonade. Thank you so much. Or compliment the person who was giving it to them. And this study was so interesting for me because it really showed me that as young as 4, girls are already socialized to swallow their discomfort in the face of someone else's needs. And this is so significant for me because when I start thinking about what it looks like to say yes or to say no or to be honest and to be authentic, if we know that at 4 and 6, these little girls already felt like they couldn't actually be honest or authentic. This was something that I thought was so telling and such an important reminder to know that as much as what we're doing is learning, we're also unlearning. We're really unpacking, and I know that we say that all the time, but we're really unpacking all of the ways that we have been socialized to feel like we are not allowed to be our honest and authentic selves. And that is part of what activism builds in our muscles, is that desire to create that space of authenticity and support it for other people, even when they can't hold it all on their own. The thing that constantly gives me comfort throughout all of this, and sometimes I think things can feel daunting. I know that this year things have felt daunting, but everything we work at gets better. Every single thing without fail. When we work at it, it gets better. And so with whatever you turn your focus and intention to, however you decide to pour yourself into it, you know you will improve the quality of your experience with it and likely the quality of others' experience. I like to think about what it means to create permanent systems. So whether I'm thinking about this on a personal level or a professional level or a collective level, I'm working in a ways that is about acclimatizing myself, so learning what's happening, implementing new changes and solutions, whether that's me on a personal basis or in the way that I'm working. I review, and this is that reflection, right? Reflection is where learning becomes wisdom. I'm going to say that part again. Reflection is where learning becomes wisdom. So when we take that time to review, it means all the things we have learned up until that moment really take that opportunity to be consolidated into wisdom. Then excel. In everything I do, I aim to be excelling and working in a way that is about giving my best. And I feel like when that happens, again, people feel that and they come and they bring that same kind of energy. And then finally, sustain. So when we're creating these kinds of changes, we're creating changes that we're hoping that will be sustainable and reflexive, but we'll keep moving in this healthy, sustaining loop. I think that it starts with kids super young. I always want to share this organizer. She does really amazing work and really great webinars on how you can work in various different capacities around anti-racism. And also just the way that we talk to each other, right? The simple ways in which we interrupt the kinds of things that happen around us, again, on a day-to-day basis, and not just the ways in which we create and organize outside of ourselves. So I do want to, I'm going to stop the share here. So I do want to share one kind of last little story, and it's just a personal story of the way I think that those things can happen, and I think that the really good risks that we can take when we think about how we infuse this energy into our day-to-day life. And I was walking on a subway platform in the city, and this person started following me, and they were a little drunk and they were doing too much. And I was feeling, concerned, nervous. And I tried to walk away and put myself around a group of people who I thought, would inspire this person to lead me away. And it didn't work that way. And then an older white woman, her name is Susan. And I know her name is Susan because her and I are friends now. But she was walking by and she locked eyes with me. And then all of a sudden said, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in so long. Are you going to the party tonight?" And I was so confused because I was like, why is everybody talking to me right now? What's going on? And then I realized what she was doing. And so I gave her a hug back. So, obviously this was like pre-COVID times. So I gave her a hug and she started walking me down the platform, and she just turned to the guy and was like, "Oh yeah, we haven't seen each other in a really long time, so we have to catch up." And as she's walking away with me, this guy starts walking. And I was like, wow, why did you do that? And she was just like, "I looked at you in your eyes and you looked scared." And, I thought to myself, and I asked her eventually, but you weren't scared and you thought it was like, what made you want to step in and do something? And she doesn't have an understanding of what privilege means or what activism means, really. She was going to go get tea. Like, she wasn't thinking about any of these things. But she thought to herself, well, I know that, like, if anything was to happen to me or if I was to feel uncomfortable, that I could tell that people would come to my rescue, but I could see that that probably wouldn't happen for you. And it's just that moment and that observation that really comes, that I think that when people are able to reach outside of themselves and see that activism is a practice that can really be filling the fiber of our lives on a day-to-day basis, then we don't miss out on those opportunities to see each other and to step in. And now, we have this really special bond based on her desire to open up that sphere of safety and bring me a little closer in. So I do hope that as we go through these difficult times, that instead of turning away from each other, we get to turn towards each other. Thank you.
I know it's a cliche, but you identified as mom, right? And I'm sure everybody has heard you turn mom upside down and you get wow, right? Thank you for an incredible keynote, right? I'm Joe Galura, right? And I'm the CASC academic advisor and a lecturer in the School of Social Work, and it's now my duty, privilege, honor to move us into the next part of the CASC celebration. We have two distinguished alum of the CASC program here, and they will talk a little bit about their work, right, and then respond to that terrific keynote. So let me introduce each of them. First, Amy Nawab graduated from the University of Michigan in 2013 with a bachelor's in women's studies and psychology and, of course, a community action and social change minor. And then she also graduated from the University of Michigan School of Social Work in 2014 with a MSW. Upon graduation, she worked in restorative justice for over 5 years in Chicago, Boulder, and Denver, primarily in schools, but also in the criminal justice system. She has experience facilitating restorative practices with kindergarten students up to 12th graders, as well as training and supporting adult educators around restorative practices. She recently switched to be a school social worker with Jefferson County Public Schools in Colorado and is still supporting restorative justice practice in schools, but as a mental health provider for schools and special education. Wang Fan is graduated from the University of Michigan in 2018 with a bachelor's in social theory and practice, and again, community action and social change minor. Now an organizer in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where she was born and raised as a first-generation Vietnamese American. She is a queer disabled abolitionist. She's worked in movements around immigration, labor, climate, prisons, and racial justice with the goal of building long-term welcoming community. She is currently the digital organizer for We the People Michigan and also the manager of her 26 Sims. Now, I wanted to start by inviting our panelists to talk a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your background, and then your connection to the term activism.
Thank you for that introduction, Joe. Wyan, do you want to go first or second? It doesn't matter to me. Second? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Kim, thank you for that amazing presentation. Like Joe mentioned, my name is Amy Nawab, and I currently am a school social worker, and I've had an interesting path to get there. As an undergrad, I was involved in intergroup relations, the Prison Creative Arts Project. I was involved in Potter as a school staff, and I did a lot on campus to organize around gender inclusive housing with the Spectrum Center. So I was involved in probably some programs that you all are involved in. And I really cared a lot about working with young people and organizing. And so youth work has been my North Star for driving how I interact with social change work. And so I didn't think about going into the School of Social Work until Katie was talking to me senior year, and she's like, have you thought about the MSW program? And I was like, Katie, I want to be an organizer. I want to do youth work. I don't know if I want to go to the School of Social Work. But then I applied and I was able to be a part of a program that focused on macro programming that was specific around youth work. And so I really found my home within the School of Social Work that fit with work I cared about and my values. And so in doing work with young people, I care a lot about youth organizing, and youth have fought for a long time for restorative justice programs in schools. And so upon graduation, I worked in Chicago doing restorative justice work. And it was really amazing to think about. Organizers have fought for us to be able to have restorative justice in schools. And now we have programs that are doing restorative justice. How do we do it? And so to be able to be on the other side implementing those programs and to do it alongside young people, I think I learned, I love the work with young people. Kim, when you had that picture of you doing yoga with young people, I was like, yes, those are my spaces. And I learned within my skill set, I really like the one-on-one group facilitation work. And so I think over time that led me to see school social work as a really amazing fit. Because I get to do the work every day with young people and be a part of the community. And so I think the question of where does that leave me as an activist, I loved the idea of we can do work where we already are. And so habits over goals. And so there's activism within my school community day to day. It's thinking about how am I making this school more trauma informed? How am I uplifting students of color? How are we creating spaces for LGBTQ students? And so having an environment like a school, you can do that activist work day to day. You have a built-in community. I also think about now I'm more involved in my neighborhood organizing. I can be involved in my union organizing. And so even though my job title is not organizer, I feel like I have so many spaces to be able to do that work still.
Diane?
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe, for the intro. Kim, that was amazing. Amy and I were taking notes. I was just thinking the whole time, like, I'm so glad that I'm writing this down and being able to process a little bit in the moment. So yeah, I'm Hwayan. I use she and her pronouns. And I graduated from U of M just a little bit ago. I think a lot of the way that I, started organizing was just in the environments that I was in, right? Like, I think that so much about what Kim was saying with, the relationships that we're building and the communities that we're in is so crucial, because that was really how I was able to get involved in the movement, right? Like, that there were people around me who loved me and who had been in the work for a long time to really create that entry point for me to get involved in the work alongside them. And for me, a lot of that starts from when I was younger. So in my bio, I talked a little bit about, I was raised here, but both my parents are Vietnamese refugees, are from the Vietnamese diaspora. And so, growing up, I was growing up single parent, and it was just my mom and me and my sister, and that was it. And we had like nothing, and we were growing up in Ann Arbor. So it's a very interesting sort of dynamic of race and immigration status, and also class and access, even if you don't have a lot of the privileges that those around you have, right? Because Ann Arbor is a wealthy town in general. And, I was growing up and we were going to protests that sort of made sense with our identities, right? But I was going to protest like against the Iraq war. We were politically involved. I would like go to play dates with my friends and like their parents and my mom, and we would like go stand outside of the federal buildings together. And I think, my mom wouldn't consider herself an organizer, and she's not, out there going to organizing meetings or anything, but there's so much of what she did that really taught me about who I was and what I wanted to do, right? Like, she never listened to what anybody told her if they were above her, or she would always act like if someone was in a position of power, like so what? Like, I am a smart person too, and I have a lot of experience too, and I can fight that. And so I think learning to kind of never to say no and to never sort of expect what people are just telling you, the rules that you have to follow, right? And so I think that that helped me sort of get involved and push me into spaces where I could really be an organizer and like learn that there were people who were behind the protests. There are people who are behind the visible rallies who are doing this work every single day in the places that they're in. And that was something that I wanted to do too. So I think when I went to college, I did some organizing around labor, particularly with the lecturers, employees organization. I also ended up doing a lot of just like general racial justice and campus equity work as well. And I think, that helped me sort of practice and hone in a lot of organizing skills that since then I've been able to practice further in the work that I'm doing at We the People Michigan.
Yeah, thank you. Right, I now want to turn a little bit more specifically to Kim's keynote. Right, so when Kim was talking, right, the first point about grassroots organizing, I'm kind of in wrapping up the semester mode with my students, and one of the texts I teach is the New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, right? And when you get to the end, right, students kind of get lost because she's writing like a law professor and there are all these cases. But in the conclusion, she says, well, wait a second, right? How did some of the civil rights movement get hijacked? Well, we moved away from the grassroots organizing and we started relying too much, right, on the lawyers to handle things, right? That, and then the energy was gone. Right, and I thought that was a really, really kind of important point, and I connected with that piece as you were talking, Kim. So, what I'd like to ask, right, our panelists, right? So, were there themes, ideas, right, that resonated with you from Kim's keynote, right? And then, do you find them relevant to your activism as a student or now?
I think, Amy, is it okay if I go? Okay. I think for me, that something that I resonated with super strongly when you were talking, Kim, was just the fact of building sustainable movements for, especially when we're entering spaces for the first time, and especially looking back towards people who have been involved for such a long time, right? Like, I think that for me, at least, like, I'm training people, I'm working with people every day at like differing experiences with social justice work or movements or whatever. And so much of, when people get excited or if they're new to something, they're like, oh, like, what's going on with this? Or like, what can I do about this? And we don't often like pause to step back and kind of think about all the ways that people have already tried to do something or all the lessons that we can learn from those who have come before us. And there's just like an incredible wealth of knowledge that already exists and that does make that blueprint. So for me, I think that really, really resonated with me. And I find that really hopeful about how much is already there and how many people have already come before me and how many people who I don't even know yet who are working every day on some of the things that I hope to do.
Amy?
I really appreciated the idea of habits over goals. And so right now in my work with students, I work with students who are within special education and they are bound to work on individual education goals. And so we're like, what is the IEP goal? What is the IEP goal? And I often find that the best way to reach those students is to help them see what are they already doing that is working and how can we celebrate and uplift what you're already good at instead of feeling like your success is something that's far away. And so I'm going to like write it on a sticky note and have it in front of me, habits over goals. And I think about like so much of my role as a school social worker who cares about activism is figuring out how to still be within my role, but also push my role to be different and to be a more inclusive social worker or a change maker within schools, because we know schools desperately need a lot of work and a lot of social change. And so I'm thinking about your theme of values in action, and how to keep coming back to my values. And we always say reflection on our action, but really give myself space to reflect so that I can keep pushing in spaces that have a lot of work to do still.
We have about 10 minutes left in this segment, right? And I think I want to connect Kim into the discussion directly, right? So, Amy and Ryan, you've heard the keynote, you've had some time to think about it. Do you have some questions, some issues, some things that you would like to engage with Kim about directly?
Yeah, for sure. So Kim, part of what you talked about, again, I thought it was so great, was how activism is not welcomed, never a time when everyone is ready. And also you were talking about sort of like, all the changes that we've seen this summer, or all the issues that now people are kind of coming to terms with. And also alongside that, there's been huge backlash, right, to a lot of the things that people are thinking. We're not, like, people are saying, we're not ready for everyone to be cared for in the healthcare system. We're not ready for millions of extra dollars to be, from police to be redistributed back to the community. We're not ready for, whatever. And so, you've been in this movement for a really, really long time, and I'm sure you've dealt with that for all of that pathway. And how do we sort of balance compromise to see real immediate changes with having an ideal outcome based on our values that people might not be ready for yet, or people are saying that we're not ready for yet?
Unmute myself. Am I muted? Okay, yeah, I'm unmuted. Change usually doesn't happen very quickly. And if it does happen very quickly, it's often not sustainable. So if there's a huge push in one direction, it's often going to experience some kind of contraction, because there will always be a backlash. That's just, there will always be opposing opinions, and there should always be opposing opinions. Obviously, we don't want people disagreeing about like the quality of people's lives and like civil rights, but we never want to be in a world where everyone feels the same way. That would be very dangerous too. We don't want there to be a monolith. So part of the importance of change happening at slower incremental ways is that it gives us more opportunity to assess how effective it is. And so I personally, that's why I like to really think about change in a way when I focus on habits on a personal level. You want to see what you're doing every single day and really trying to keep building things in that very natural way. And that's really how you see a change. That's how you break a habit. It takes like 21 days to change a bad habit. So for human beings as a whole, we're changing personal habits and collective habits and legal habits. Like, there are a lot of shifts that are happening. So it does necessitate a slowness that none of us want. We like want things to happen right away. And that's part of us being human too, right? We desire instant gratification, but we actually don't need instant gratification. We wouldn't want it. We actually would not like it if it kept happening that way. So I always want us to know that there's a slowness that should happen. We should be careful. We should ask ourselves a lot of questions, because activists are wrong all the time, because we're humans, right? So people make all sorts of decisions and ideas that aren't necessarily going to be good in practice, or do need to run up against other people who are knowledgeable in other ways for things to flesh out. So I do always want us, slowness is important. Slowness is important. I do think what's helpful, is when we get more people to recognize that activism or civil engagement is all a part of their responsibility. I think it's amazing that in order to vote, you don't have to have a certain kind of education. They're not saying like, well, you have to have graduated from high school, or you have to have a PhD. You can be a lot of different kind of people, not necessarily everyone we want to be included as voters, but we have a lot of different kind of people who all get to vote. They all have the right to. That is a very unique democratic institution to exist. I really think that the more that all individuals feel a sense of responsibility to that and to taking care of ourselves in general, you know, like whether you want to be an activist and you don't want to vote and you take a position against that, or you're voting, or you are a social worker, or you are a community organizer, it's like get in where you fit in. Like encourage people to find their outlets, because that's how we become more sustainable. If everyone's doing more of the work, then individuals don't burn out so fast. You don't have to have these like superstar activists who are like doing a whole lot if millions more people recognize their role as activists in their own countries, in their own communities, in their own cities. Like, I want people to feel a sense of responsibility to each other. And that's what I like to encourage more, and less like, what do we need to do? I'm like, more people need to be involved, more people at the table, more people doing stuff, more moms, more kids, more families, more people involved in saying, this is what's important to me in my community, and I want to express that in a variety of different mediums.
Amy, did you have a question or an issue you'd like to follow up with Kim?
And I just want to speak really quickly, that really resonates, doing what sustains you. When I was in CASC, CASC was great. It was like all my friends, and I realized we could get a minor for doing all the classes that we were already taking. And at the time, we all were really passionate about organizing, but now, a few years out of college, we're not all organizers. So I'm thinking about my friend Allie is doing policy work in Chicago public schools. My friend Nora, who is a CASC minor, is in law school. My husband Brock, who is a CASC minor, is an organizer. And so we're all doing the work in different ways. And I think in school it felt so theoretical that it would fit together. But now that we're doing the work, we can see like, yeah, I see how what you're doing is building towards what we all want to see. And it's awesome. My question for you, I loved your piece about being humble. I think that's something over time I've had to learn and grapple. And I'm wondering, Kim, could you share a time that you made a mistake, were humbled, and learned from that experience? And then what did it look like to come back after you had made that mistake?
So when I had started doing some workshops, I was focusing a lot on racism. And in one of my sessions was this Indigenous guy who wouldn't want me to say his name. But he was like, you don't include nowhere near enough anti-Indigenous racism work in here. You just don't. And he's like, and you're here on this land, and you know, you have this particular background, and you really can't just be talking about this in this way. And he put his hand right up in the workshop, and you know, it was like several hundred people, and he was right. And I could only say like, you're right. You're right. I was like, I got to do better. And I asked him if there's anything that he would want to add, but not that he has to. And he shared some things in general about like the ways that anti-Indigenous racism looks for him. And he pointed out, and I said, if you wanted to share any like resources or tell me any people. And I compiled some information from him that I shared with everyone, and then had them pay him for his work. And I paid him a portion of what I made in that workshop. And then I just tried to do better. And I worked more with Indigenous communities, and I gave more money to Indigenous initiatives, and I collaborated more with Indigenous communities. But I was just like super wrong. and he just told me, and I was just, yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, I will be humbled, and I'm humbled all the time. When I was at Gallaudet University, a deaf university in DC, they were writing all the different ways that like hearing people have made them feel about themselves. And I was like, yes, I've done that. I've definitely done an event like that. I've done that. Like, it was just a whole experience of like, okay, good points all around. You know, you're wrong. We're wrong a lot. We're wrong a lot. So I just try to be wrong. Like, I try not to run away from being wrong, and I just try to embrace that I'm wrong and apologize and work to make amends. And if people also don't want to make amends with me, that's okay too, you know, but it is such a weight to carry to feel like you're not going to make a mistake. Like, it's so much worse because you're going to, and then it's going to like shatter your universe. And this way I'm just like in the world, like knowing like someone's going to let me know about myself at some point. You know, like that's one of the gifts that we come when we run up against each other, especially in spaces where people are trying really hard, you know, and their identities are on the line. So yeah, that's one of the times, two of the times.
Thank you.
Let me thank our panelists. Let me thank Kim again for an excellent keynote. And I think right on cue, Katie, right? It's time to transition over to you for your closing remarks.
Great. I mean, wow. Really what I can say, what an incredible hour and a half. And I can't think of a better way and a better session to reflect on the CASC Minor, both in thinking about how to reflect on our own practice, what we do, and how we've worked together, the mistakes we've made along the way, the lessons that we've learned. But also to give us so many nuggets. I have so many notes written down here to think about, to help push us forward and to think about the possibilities and imagine something new. And Kim, I'm so reflecting on the idea of maps, not monuments. And I just think about like, what's the map that we've created over the last 10 years? And how can we consider kind of building from the maps, from the ups and the downs and the different ways we've learned and the different people who have helped to kind of shape and add to its development, and how do we build on that map moving forward? And so I just want to appreciate so much these comments and setting the stage for giving us some time to reflect, but helping us kind of think about what that map, how we build on that map and create the next 10 years. And thank you to Amy and to Wyan and to all of you for your thoughts and your words and your reflections. I just can't really think of a better way to spend our 10th year anniversary, but to have this panel. So with that, I would love for you to raise a glass or a water bottle or a coffee mug, or if you have your CASC coffee mug. I was thinking I don't have one of them at home, but you know, whatever you have, but to celebrate to us, to CASC, to the community we've created, and to the community that we will continue to create over the next 10 years. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to all of you for your ideas and your work, to the students, to the alums, and as Joe Galore would say, CASC out. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
Here's to CASC.
That's all.
Thank you. CASC out.
Amber's got the mug.